Hi, this is KARL-JAMES Langford, Archaeology Comparison Part 1. When we undertook this lecture, there was a problem with the slide order, and none of my students could see the slides coming up on their screen when I could see them on my screen. So even though they could hear me speaking and telling them all about the chambers that we were describing, the chambers, with the heavy singular lids on them, they could, the audio was coming through perfect, but the images weren't in any sequence. So what I thought I'd do was just to do a bit of an annex and an addition. So if anyone's watching this, this is the second of 2 videos, and the one is as I've explained. So this is part 1 of archaeology comparison. The first image itself is of an unusual site known as Great Keswick. And this site itself is to be found on the Furness Peninsula in Cumbria. And this site itself is one of those very weird chambers that there was very little out there. But this is the one I started off with anyway. And then we went to Langhfoord and Langhfoord in Cornwall. So this series of lectures is to compare 4 different areas of Great Britain: Orkney, Cornwall, Cymru, and Cumbria. So the first chambered site that we visited was Langhfoord, which I'd actually just visited as part of a Archaeology Cymru student excursion to Cornwall and Devon. So I remember saying that the capstone itself has been reconstructed from when it fell in 1815. It was sort of replaced up there, looking almost perfect, and these things definitely weren't perfectly aligned and so on. So typical in this landscape, you can see an engine house for a Cornish tin mine in the distance, and the typical uprights supporting this huge capstone, about 15 tons in weight. Obviously, there's lots more that I said in the lecture, so we're just using this as a supplement. The next site that we actually visited then, looking at these big chambered capsules of time more than anything, with these great capstones on the top. And one thing I mentioned quite consistently was not only do we have the capstone, we have 3 uprights, 1, 2, 3, and then there's a hole in the back. And there's similarities with a site in Cornwall, actually. The Trevithick quote, with having a hole in a stone at Trevithick quote. This site is actually in the Vale of Glamorgan, so quite far away from Cornwall. I wouldn't set out and walk it. It takes at least 5.5 hours to get down to Cornwall from this part of Cymru. And of course, both beautiful landscapes. So again, so there's the st.Lythans burial chamber. One thing I said throughout the lectures was that the concept of the burial chamber is more towards the end of the life of these chambers. So these chambers constructed as far back as 6,000 years ago. So when they come into the end of their life, we see that they're being used for burials, but with some of them excavated before that time, before the period of burials, we don't really find bones associated with them, which is a bit strange. So again, this wonderful site, and you can't see the hole in this one really. It's sort of hidden a bit obliquely. There it is. So again, just if you want some more detail, then just go with the first part of the video. So again, looking inside this wonderful chamber, and that was remarked upon in 1807, having a great mound associated with this, which is now gone, which would have headed in a westerly direction. So one thing I pointed out was, you know, the orientations, and this side being the north, and then you can work out the rest. Simple as that. So get rid of that one. Good. So I basically said that in this lecture it was supposed to be a comparison with, you know, Cumbria, Cornwall, Cumbria, and Orkney, but we couldn't actually find these types of chambers that we could see at the other three regions as in Orkney. So I said, you know, we can't always compare sites. You know, next week we can look at stone circles in all those 4 areas, but when we're looking at big singular capstones over remains in Orkney, you don't really get that. You see multiple stones above chambers in Orkney. That's the Orkney Isles and mainland Orkney. So the site I just showed then was known as the Unster burial chamber, but obviously not with a single capstone. I used this one as a really unusual one at Great Keswick, and I just basically said, well, you know, this site is very similar to the surrounding landscape, but, you know, even with some inference from man, woman, it sort of blends in a bit, doesn't it? Quite a small monument, and there it is. Oh God, it's getting late. This is being recorded at 1:20 I've been referring to it as the site at Keswick. I've actually meant Urswick, a slight difference. But anyway, the point being held. So this chambered monument, not really been excavated like most of these sites. And then I started to compare all this with the Trevithy Quoit, which is in Cornwall. And there it is. A little bit of a distance from the site that we just mentioned. But nevertheless, a very important site, the Trevithy. It's sort of near at the back of a row of houses, very strange there. And 7 uprights supporting a diagonal stone. And I mentioned as well about this hole being here when we saw the cromlech at st.lythans, that the hole was sort of in one of the ossoliths, the uprights, rather than from the roof. Then what I then said was, there we go, 7 uprights. It's, you know, it's obviously been formed at an angle, very strange. And then last image I basically showed everybody this great boulder, a great, intriguingly big boulder, probably around in excess of somewhere around about 25 tons. And there it is, Arthurstone Cefn Bryn. And one thing I said about this is that the boulder has always been there, but what they did to give the appearance that it's sort of floating was, this was lying on the ground and the rubble. So what they did was undermine one side and then put a boulder there, another side boulder there, and they did that. But the boulder never really settled. So if you're looking at this, you can clearly see that there's space between the boulder and the ossolith. Again, it's all about interpretation. Again, giving you an idea of scale. Arthurstone, wonderful capstone monument. So this is recorded extremely late because I didn't feel that you know, my students needed to have this sequence. So anyway, it's KARL-JAMES LANGFORD as addition to comparisons of archaeology across Britain and part 1. So thanks for watching, just for you guys. And stop share and